Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that is always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value at a time in history when most people have more on their plates than any one human should. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. Some words people have used to describe me range from speaker, trainer, coach, healer, writer, spiritual advisor, teacher, podcaster, and someone even called me their soul Sherpa once. I'm less concerned with titles or labels and more interested in results, change, and creating a world we want to, can, and are proud to live in. A kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths. They trust in themselves, in life, and recognize that we need each other. And they know how to cultivate healthy relationships to true power, not the very unhealthy kind of power our current culture is predicated upon. Speaking of our culture, there's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth D'Alto. You can expect a wide range of topics when you tune into this show. Everything from health, communication, money, success, parenting, desire, sex, love, and spirituality, to making pivots and transitions in life, and topics related to psychology, storytelling, gender and race issues, emotional intelligence, activism, advocacy, and much more. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating and review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here with me. Here we go. Welcome to episode number 253 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto. I am your host, Elizabeth D'Alto, and today's guest, Geneen Roth, is straight up prolific. This woman is the author of 10 books. And aside from what she's created, she is a really brilliant thinker, teacher, and I would even call her a healer. Her big truth was this: most of our mental anguish is caused by the stories we tell ourselves about a situation, not by the situation itself. So we explored that, along with how to navigate our mental stories and land in the present moment, the paradox of choices and how that impacts decision-making, using your body for guidance to prevent anxiety, using your eyes to really see, what being, quote, appropriate means in these times we're living in right now, how age affects our concept of beauty, and she shared a few excerpts from her most recent book that were really, really beautiful. This is a fiery conversation. I hope you enjoy it and share it up. If you want links to anything we talked about or to learn anything else about Geneen, head on over to untameyourself.com/T as in truth, T as in telling -253. Again, that's untameyourself.com/TT-253. If you're interested in discussing the episode, come on over to Instagram and find me at Elizabeth D'Alto. Send me a DM or comment on our weekly podcast post, and I would love to know what you think of the episode. All right, let's get into it. All right, y'all, this is going to be a super fun interview. I'm very excited to have Geneen Roth here. So Geneen, opening question, what's a truth that's having a big impact on your life right now?
That most of my mental anguish and what I call my suffering is caused by the stories I tell myself about a situation, not by the situation itself.
This is amazing. And I'm curious, this is something, in all kind of self-help, personal development work, this is a pretty core concept. But an area I've been looking at this for myself recently has been around dating. I just started dating after a year and a half. I called it my man sabbatical. I had a relationship end. I'm like, let me just get some time to reconnect to myself. And it's fascinating to see how good I am at this in all these other areas of my life. And then I
Yes.
start dating and there's like new people who are totally different than what I'm used to. I'm in a new town and I'm like, look at all the stories I want to write and I want to tell myself. So I'm curious, do you find with your own self or with clients and people you work with, is this categorical? Is that just me? Or do people tend to be like better at navigating this in some areas than others?
Well, I think it's great that you're better at navigating this in all the other areas of your life. You're doing better than me because I find it difficult to not interpret or give an opinion of any situation at all. And I have to constantly catch myself again and again and again, because some of the time I feel like I'm 100% right.
Yeah.
There's just no doubt here. And of course I'm right. Isn't it obvious? Anybody who is in this situation would have seen the exact same thing. And so I think it's actually difficult. I think it's challenging across the board. So great that you don't find it challenging in so many other areas of your life.
Well, I think it depends on so many factors, right? Life is so complex and there's so many variables. It could depend on where I am in my cycle, what's going on in my business, like how everything else is going. So I'm not saying that I'm awesome at this in all these other categories all the time, but certainly there's other variables. So I like how you answered that. It's difficult not to interpret or give an opinion. Do you have an example? Is there anything recent that you could share where you had an experience around this?
Yes. For instance, I'll just give you the most mundane.
Okay.
The most mundane example. I texted a friend and she didn't text me back. And texts, there are different rules now about texts. With text, usually the person texts back right away. This person didn't. I think it was maybe 2 days. And in those 2 days, the amount of stories that I made up. Now, it wasn't that I was in intense mental anguish, that it was stopping me from living my life, but I was pretty convinced that I had done or said something that she didn't like, something that had happened, that, I was in the space of not knowing. I had put my own interpretations of what was going on, that it was something I did. And it's very interesting to watch that whole turnaround, because it started out with just the simple fact she didn't answer a text. Then it went into my different interpretations and opinions about why she didn't answer the text. And then suddenly it switched to, well, I didn't like her anyway, and this, and that. So it includes that entire cycle, of it's my fault, and then it's somebody else's fault. I think what I'm really talking about here is my tendency to be married to negativity, to be a victim, to even in the subtlest way, to feel as if somebody did me wrong. There's a situation, it might not have worked out the way my first preference would have been, and I go immediately, or went immediately. I'm getting better and better at this because I'm becoming more and more aware of it. Yeah. I used to go immediately to something's wrong and I'm to blame.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is fascinating. I find the same to be true. Fairly often, we're not going, oh, they must be off having a wonderful experience somewhere.
Right.
I hope they're so happy and they're making love, or they're traveling, or maybe they're doing the most creative work of their life, or engrossed in a wonderful book. We're like, what did I do? What's wrong with me?
Yes.
Maybe I'm too much. Why do we do that?
Because of a couple of things. I think drama and negativity and seeing ourselves as the one who was done wrong to, it goes very, very deep. I mean, I could answer that question in a brain science evolutionary way and, say, well, because our brains developed to look for and be hypervigilant about scary situations or threats or danger. And that's true. But this is really taking it to where we're creating the so-called stress or danger and then reacting to it and putting our systems in a loop because of it. And so I think we're very used to that. We're used to operating in that kind of paradigm of drama and something's wrong. And because I often say, because it gives us a job to do, then we get to fixing ourselves, asking ourselves what's wrong, what can we do better, the great self-improvement project.
Yeah. So do you not believe in self-improvement?
Well, that's a multidimensional answer for me. The way that at least I was going about it, and the way that many, many, many of my retreat students were going about it, was not working because there was always something else to fix.
Yeah.
Because it was a never-ending project. Because I never got around to, or rarely got around to, and this is true with them, and I have worked with hundreds and hundreds and really tens of thousands of women over the years, never got around to the lusciousness of acceptance, the calm, the contentment, and the objectivity of, well, if this is true about me, then what is also true about me? Or is there something I can do to alleviate my own pain about this, or the effect that this behavior is having on other people? I don't call that self-improvement. I call that coming from a place of objective looking and acceptance.
Yeah.
So that I'm not always raising the bar. So when this part of myself is fixed, then there's the next part that needs to be fixed, and the next part. And oftentimes in my work with women in food, I saw this happen all the time. Women would get to a weight where they felt that, where they felt content for 5 minutes, and then they would immediately say, I need to lose more weight. Or they wouldn't take in, that's the other part of it, they wouldn't receive the goodness.
Yeah.
The happiness, the peace, the satisfaction, the joy of having achieved a goal. They raised the bar so that one student said, I would die to be as thin as I was 5 years ago, when I would have died to have been thinner. So even when she was at the weight where she wanted to be, she just couldn't land there. She wasn't living in her body, or what I call living in her own two shoes. And she was constantly looking for what was wrong about it. Well, maybe I did lose that weight, but still, my thighs are too big, or my arms jiggle too much. And there wasn't any landing in, resting in, accepting in, and then deciding what the next step was.
I appreciate the context and the examples that you've given around this, because again, categorically, you're speaking about body, but this could go for anything, right? Achievement, the job, you make more money, you got the promotion, you're now living in the bigger house, or all the things. Is this an addiction? Is this a compulsion? I know this is very Western culture for sure. More, faster, better, stronger. It's almost like this obsession with there must be something better. It's never good enough.
Yes, right. I think that's part of how our minds work, because at least what I learned in all the years that I studied meditation and went to many meditation retreats was that the mind has an impossible time landing in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
It ricochets from the past, it drags the past into the present and projects it onto the future. So one answer to that question is, well, yes, it's the nature of the mind. I mean, I think that is true. That doesn't actually answer deeply how we feel day to day when we're schlepping our pasts into our present, going over and over and over them, seeing the present through the glaze of our past that we're interpreting as imperfect and wrong, and therefore carrying the whole thing into the future. So I think this culture of more is so painful. I have to say, I saw this when my husband and I lost all of our money in 2008. And I realized two things then. It was a stunning time for me. I mean, it was horrifying, shocking, and at least the first week or two was terrifying because I wasn't sure how we were going to live. But what I realized quickly, because I had a lot of good friends to remind me of this, was that before we lost our money, I had been living in that trance of not enough, of more. I had not been taking in what we did have and appreciating what we did have. I was worried about losing it. And I think that's what happens. I mean, I notice my mother often says, well, I buy one red lipstick and I have to buy two just in case I lose one. So there's that feeling of give me another one, because the nature of things and situations and relationships is that they change. And so I think we realize that we're sort of on shaky ground in a way. Our bodies change, our relationships change, situations change. Things that were fabulous last year are not so fabulous this year. Things that are not fabulous this year may turn around to be fabulous next year. We just don't know, but we do know that things change. And that's hard for us because, you know, we want stability. And so what I realized after we lost our money and when I started focusing on, because the only way to get through the night was to focus on what I did have, not what I didn't have, what I could find, not what I had lost. And so I had to focus on the simplest things, like the fact that I still had a roof over my head, that I had sardines in the pantry, that I could walk, that I could talk, that I still had chocolate, that I still had my favorite teacup. And as I really became vigilant about not letting myself wander into the future about what was going to happen, which is fear, or into the past, which is regret, I became happier and happier. And so within a couple of weeks, I was as happy, if not happier, than I'd ever been, despite the fact that we had just lost 30 years of life savings. It was extraordinary.
That's really amazing because, again, I think our culture is so attached to the material things. And it's like the biggest fear. And it's funny that we're having this conversation right now. Everyone who listens to the show knows that I geek out on synchronicity. I had a thing happen this week where through a miscommunication with my accountant, I thought I had a tax payment plan set up. It was in fact not set up. And I woke up like at the time of recording this, like 3 days ago, with a government imposed levy on my checking account. So it was basically like all of my money I can't access. Like I still can't access it. It takes 30 to 45 days to resolve. And there was nothing in me that went to panic. I actually just started cracking up because I was like, okay, this is everything that you were just saying. These are things that I think about all the time. I teach other people as well. And I'm like, great. How am I going to react to this? How I get to be resourceful right now. I get to go, you know, if there's luckily as a privileged person, there's a million people who could help me out. Even when I was telling my team, I'm like, hey, I'm not going to be able to pay you for 2 to 4 weeks now. My project manager was like, do you need money? And I was like, I'm fine. But, it's also cool to see how different people respond in those situations as well. So there's my response, there's other people's responses, and they're really like, what else can you do? It's kind of like one of those things where it's so hard to be in the moment, but then something happens where you have no choice.
Yes. And I think having no choice is actually fabulous.
Yes.
Because you have to, you sort of have to fall on the sword of having no choice. And then you actually have two choices. One, I can suffer about this, or two, I don't have to suffer. What does not suffering look like right now? Those are the only choices. Those actually are usually our only choices anyway. But when there's no choice, we convince ourselves that we do have choices.
Yeah. And this is amazing because I think the paradox of choice is one of the biggest issues we face in the 21st century. And in some cases, there's so many choices. The problem is not what to do, but it's actually just choosing which thing. It's so overwhelming.
Yes. Yes. And that's why it's helpful. One of the first things I do when I wake up every day, and also that I really encourage the people I work with to do, what I called before standing in my own two shoes, really landing in my body, feeling my feet on the floor, my butt in the chair, if I'm actually sitting, if I'm laying in bed, just feeling the mattress beneath me, sensing my body so that there's a real place from which to make decisions. The mind is so crazy that if you just listen to your mind as your guidance, it can take you into some very unexpected and not particularly helpful places. But if you use your body as your GPS, as your main source of guidance in terms of what is it telling you, you will know immediately if the choice that you're making is one that causes it contraction, anxiety, a tight chest, a tight stomach, or not. And so it's a great resource to have.
I love this. This is also a big part of, one of the things I do is I have a sensual movement practice for women called Wild Soul Movement. That's all about helping them get out of their heads and into their bodies. And one of the things I've discovered over the years, and I'm super curious because I think you've worked with far more people than I have, is once we get that information from the body, it's different how people interact with it. So for some people, the initial impulse is correct. For some people, the initial impulse, they actually need to feel into things a little bit deeper and it's just a clue. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it does.
What's your experience with that?
My experience is exactly what you just said, which is that some people know immediately. I'm somebody that it takes a while. I have to really sit with something and notice what I'm leaning towards, what my body is telling me. And it's not always obvious. So I take more time than other people might take in deciding, because then I let that decide for me, but it takes time.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So I've been geeking out on, have you ever heard of human design?
Yes.
Oh, do you know what you are?
I forgot.
Okay. So I love this so much. And so I used to have this practice that I would teach people, the yes, no, truth practice. And then I realized this is how I discovered the root of the last question I asked you. For some people, it was so easy. They could tap in. They'd be like, yep, I get my instant yes. I get my instant no. And then when I go with that, it's the correct decision. And after learning about my human design, I have something called emotional authority. There's sacral authority, splenic authority. There's a couple of other different types that I'm not as familiar with. But what I realized is, and I'm cleaning this up in my life right now, that my initial impulse is not correct. It's like what we were just saying. I'm like you. I need to then take my time. I need to feel things out a little bit deeper. I need to minimally sleep on it, if not give myself way more time. And then also for me, kind of look for the signs and the synchronicities to confirm what that initial hit in my body was. But there are some people who the initial hit is accurate. Some people with the sacral authority, they have the like, or the and it's a real like gut feeling. And I had to correct my teaching because some people were thinking they were supposed to feel something in their body that was never going to happen for them. Like they don't have that gut connection. That's not their thing. Some people don't have that just like automatic knowing. So it's been fascinating to look back on the last several years of my choices and go, oh my goodness, look at all. Sometimes it was accurate, that initial thing. Sometimes it really wasn't. And then it always created like a little bit of a mess or just something that I would have to clean up or correct later.
Yes. Right. Yeah, it's very good to see that. What I would also say, and this isn't about human design, but what I call the crazy ant in the attic, which is the voice in the head that is playing on and on and on for most of us all day long. It stops when we sleep. It's the voice of you should, you shouldn't, you ought to, they need to, I want them to, how come they didn't, how come I didn't. It's a voice of judgment. It's a harsh voice. It's a shaming voice. It's usually against oneself, but it can be turned the other way against other people. And as long as that voice is going, and everybody's got one, and again, if it's in the attic, I call it the crazy ant in the attic, because if it's in the attic, but you're living 2 floors down, you don't have to listen to it at all. It doesn't matter. You don't have to do anything about it. Just naming it helps. It's hard to know what to do, what to eat, where to go, if the crazy ant in the attic is always telling you you should be doing something else. Yeah. So that's a big piece of the work that I've done with myself and that I also do with students, and that, of course, I write about in this Messy, Magnificent Life, because I think it's crucial that people see it, name it, disengage from it. But first of all, see that it's not them. That ant is not me. She is not my friend.
Yeah. I have a slightly off-topic question, and then I want to know more about the Messy, Magnificent Life. Something that I've been really unpacking and been really conscious of on the show and in my work and in everything I share and write and say on social media lately are terms that are actually quite offensive to some people. And I know that I was not always aware of these things until people like give you feedback. When you use the term crazy, do people get upset about that? Have you received feedback about that it's actually offensive to people with mental health issues, or has that not come up for you?
No, nobody's mentioned that.
Oh, interesting. Because and again, I think for some people it's more sensitive than others, but I was just curious because again, I know you have a much larger audience than we do here.
Uh-huh.
So, tell me more about, you've written several books. How many is this now?
10.
10. Jesus. I wrote one a couple years ago and it was excruciating. I can't. So let's talk about that for a minute. Is it easy for you now? Is it torturous? What's your writing experience? How do you know when it's time to write a new book? What is it like for you?
I know it's time to write a new book when there are a lot of things I want to know that I want to find out through writing about them. Writing is often the way I know what I know, but I don't often know it without writing about it. So I start having a lot of questions that I find out through writing. And I love writing. And I've loved writing since being very, very, very young. It's sort of like painting for me. It's a way of painting a picture of what's going on in the moment so that I can stand back and look at it. And I'm not aware of the whole extent of it until I've written it down. So it's very, very helpful. Now, not everybody feels like that about writing. Some people, it's an absolute slog. It's anguish. Mm-hmm. For me, it's both, because even those of us who love writing there are many days where I will be struggling with a sentence or a paragraph and nothing is coming.
Yeah.
And I just have to be willing to sit there or stand there with nothing's coming, and also be aware at that moment of the crazy aunt in the attic who's saying, nobody cares about this. Why are you even doing this? Who do you think cares? Or who's even going to read this? Nobody. Just give up and go out to lunch with your friends in a restaurant that has pretty red geraniums in it. So
specific. Your aunt is specific.
I can end up feeling very sorry for myself if I don't watch it on the days where it's coming with great difficulty. But I also know that if I stick through those days, and sometimes there'll be many days in a row, it's not just gonna be one day or one paragraph. There's a piece in this book which happens to be one of my favorite pieces in the book, called The Blue Vest. And it's probably, I don't know, 6 pages long. I think it took me 2 months, maybe 3 months to write that piece.
Wow.
Because it wasn't coming easily, but it's now one of my favorite pieces in the book. And it seems to be other people's one of their favorite pieces too.
So do you think it is your favorite because of how much it took and how much time and care and energy and attention and labor? Or is it the content and the subject matter, or some combination?
I think it's one of my favorites, because it's not actually my very favorite, but it's because I have about 4 or 5 very favorite pieces. I like this one because it's multi-layered. It's not about just one thing. It's about beauty. It's about clothes. It's about shopping. It's about what shopping and beauty has to do with spirituality.
Oh, interesting.
It has to do with about myself in that regard. It has to do with aging, with my childhood. It has to do with so many things. And I like that there are many themes in that piece, and it's also very funny. And so I like pieces that, for me, when I'm writing, where suddenly what will happen is that a quick turn will be made. And when I'm writing, I have no idea what's going to come out. So
Right.
I don't map out the pieces. I just let them sort of direct me. And I never know how they're going to end, or how long they're going to be, or what's going to be covered in the piece. And so that answers that question about the blue vest.
Yeah. And so now I feel like, can you tell us about the blue vest? Because I feel like people listening are like, but tell us what it is. We'll get the book, but tell us a little bit now.
Okay. All right. Well, you want me to read you the first paragraph?
Sure. That'd be great.
Or do you want me to just tell you?
Whatever you prefer. I trust you.
Okay. So let's see.
While you look for it, I'm not yelling at you, by the way. I'm from New York. That's how I talk. I get very excited.
Yes, good. It starts out, we saw it in the window of a store on a side street in San Francisco. The piece of clothing for which I'd been waiting without knowing I'd been waiting. Come and be enthralled, it whispered. Let my fringes anoint you. I slipped into the floor-length vest like a swan would slip into her wings, and I glided around the room as if the store was my lake. As I passed the rows of jackets and racks of shoes, I felt like Harry Potter in his invisibility cloak, except that mine was made of manifest blue enchantment. Do you like it? I asked my husband when I emerged from the swoon. Where might you wear this? He asked, eyeing the shimmering blue fabric. It doesn't seem appropriate to wear around the house or to Whole Foods. And then I go on about where I live and how we live in the country down a long gravel road, and about what it's like to love things and be somebody who wishes she didn't love things. And I start asking about what beauty is, and do I feel beautiful, and did I once feel beautiful? And it just roams the territory. And when I read it out loud, people laugh and they think, and they're enthralled. And so that's what I love about it. I love it, but I also love the effect and the impact it has on people, because of course writing a piece is very satisfying, but then reading the piece and having other people read it is half of it as well. I mean, it just doubles the joy.
Yeah, this is a really great point back on the writing piece, that part of what makes it enjoyable doesn't come until after, when other people are having their reactions and their experiences. I was enthralled. I was grateful that the connection wasn't so great and we weren't on video the way we usually are, because I just closed my eyes and let you wash me away with that passage. So thank you for that.
Yes.
I want to hone in on, your husband said, do you think it's appropriate? Especially for women or anyone who identifies as a woman listening, there is so much in the external world that dictates what is or isn't appropriate for us. So how does that piece land for you? Like, what's appropriate and what's not? And I'm also curious how age interacts with that, since you mentioned aging.
I don't think very much about what's appropriate and not appropriate.
Good for
and
you.
that might be a function of my age.
Mm.
I don't know. But think about it very much. When he asked me, did I think it was appropriate to wear, or I can't even remember now what exactly he said. I listened to him. I took it in, but then I realized I had my own decisions about it. But it got me off on a question about beauty, about what I think is beautiful, and about do I consider myself beautiful, or did I ever consider myself beautiful, and how has aging affected my concept of beauty? And that's what I talk about in the piece as well. So it's a piece about material things like the blue vest and shopping and the love of beautiful things and the enchantment of them and the pleasure of having a body and adorning the body with beautiful things. But it is also a piece about aging and about what it feels like to be aging, and also to love beauty at the same time, how to come to. And I wouldn't exactly say all that happens in a couple of pages in the blue vest, but I bring up questions in there that were deeply satisfying for me to bring up, that I wasn't even aware that I was having until I wrote them. So does that answer your question?
It does. And now I want to know, what were some of those questions? You don't have to tell me all of them, but anything that comes to the top of your mind.
Well, for me, one of them, when I noticed that my neck was starting to have the effects of gravity upon it, or as I say in this piece, that my neck was starting to look like the neck of my dying father, and with its jowls. And there's one time in the book where I say that when I run into people that I haven't seen for a long time, let's see, where is it? Although I still feel youngish, and that everyone my age is an adult, whereas I am merely in disguise, as Margaret Atwood puts it, I am still somewhat shocked when I ask for a senior discount at the movie theater and there is no protest. If I see a friend for the first time in a few years, I wonder whether he's had a stroke or is dying because he looks so diminished. And then I realized that he's probably wondering the same thing about me. So I definitely tackle this here, and I tackle it really having ruled out plastic surgery of any kind for reasons that I list in this piece. Then I tackle it about with what really is the meaning of beauty and what is it that inspires me and enchants me. And I quote a French novelist who says, "So much beauty and so few eyes to see it." And that goes back to what we were saying before. It goes back to, can you open your eyes, use your eyes to see, your ears to listen? Can you really take in the wonder, the miraculousness, the beauty of being alive in this moment? Are we here? And I love that quote because so much beauty, so few eyes to see it, gives me the sense that there's so much to be seen if I just open my eyes and look around.
100%. I love this so much. I find it to be so moving. And I'm super curious if people listening are also moved by this right now. And I'm, it's my show. I could do what I want. I'm going to bring it back to the context of dating right now. I've never actually really dated in my adult life. I was in relationships for almost 10 years straight with only some short breaks in between because I just kept meeting people to partner with. But now that I'm interested in dating, I have a friend, Betsy Blankenbaker, who I'm still trying to get her on the show too, who wrote this great book called Autobiography of an Orgasm. And in it, at the age of 45, she decided to really take on her own pleasure as a research project. And part of that was about dating and being with different partners. And I'm like, I've never given myself the space to do that. And not even just sexually, but just like be with different types of people. Like we tend to stay comfortable in our little comfort zones and, with the people that we're interested in. So I had always been against dating apps and I decided to try one. And now it's like this really fun social experiment. And so what you're saying is I'm really in the active practice right now of putting on those goggles of looking for the beauty and the amazingness in people and these men I'm meeting instead of judging and finding things wrong and finding the differences. I'm like, what's amazing about this man? There might be a million things that I'm not into, but like, what's so amazing? Is he smart? Is he really funny? Is it this life experience he has? Like, what is so cool about this person? And then of course, realizing I could always be doing that with other people too.
Yes. But not only just with other people, any situation at all.
Yeah. And of course with ourselves, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I want to hear more. What are some of your other, again, you don't have to tell me all of them, but you love the blue vest. It's always fun to hear what people love about their own work, or I think that. What are some other favorite parts for you of this new book?
I love the piece where I'm talking about taking on a no complaining practice, and that I decided to stop complaining. And it's been 2 years now that I haven't been complaining about anything. And it's been extraordinary because that also goes back to what you and I were saying about the draw to what's wrong, to negativity. And the effect of, I talk about this, and this actually also is related to the crazy aunt in the attic, the effect of not complaining and not seeing what's wrong has been to see the beauty in so many places. And it hasn't been to knock me unconscious and make me like a blob. It's more been, now it becomes clearer what I'd like to do, or if there's anything to do in this situation. So I love that piece. There's a piece called Snorkeling in the Night Sky. Every chapter in the book starts with an everyday situation. The first third of the book is about the relationship with food, because most of the books I've written have been about using food and the relationship with food as a gateway to your core beliefs about being alive, to your beliefs about deprivation and joy and pleasure and satisfaction, and what you're allowed to have and what you're not allowed to have, and what you do when you feel like you can't get enough of what you actually want, and how food comes into that. And if you take too much food, too much meaning according to your hunger, or not enough because you feel like less is more, or you feel like you can never get enough. So I've been fascinated with that. And the first third of the book is about that. There is a piece called If I Were Gloria Steinem in that first third. And I love that piece because in that piece, I talk about what would happen if women released the energy that they have tied up in judging their bodies and their thighs and their arms and their weight and the very concept of power and women and what it is to stand in your own true power, I love that piece. There's also a piece called Strings Attached in the second part of the book, which is called Through the Mind. So the first part is around the table. The second part is through the mind. And the third part is into the sublime. And in the second part, there's a piece called Strings Attached about an exercise that I first learned in my own therapy that I then started teaching to my retreat students about boundaries, and in which I was handed. It started with me being handed a piece of red string and putting a circle around myself that was supposed to, sitting in the center of it, putting it around myself that was supposed to delineate where I felt my energetic, how much space I felt like I was allowed to take up. And the red string was the perimeter of that circle. And I realized when I first did it, the first time, I felt like I wasn't supposed to take up space. Wasn't that my body wasn't actually mine, which was so shocking that I was going to get in trouble if I said no. And that I didn't realize then that no and I don't want to are complete sentences, and I'm not talking about extreme cases of abuse. I'm just talking about what it feels like to have a woman's body and what I had never accounted for in how I felt about my own body, that I had internalized a lot of the judgments that other people had made or objectified my body in the same way, so that I was treating myself the same way that my body had been treated by a lot of different people. And that wasn't well. So I love that piece because when I handed the red string to my retreat student, a group of 100 people or 150 people, before I could even finish the instructions, half of them were crying and saying, I'm not allowed to. I'm not supposed to. I'll get in trouble if. They said the same things that I said. And I've loved going through that process with myself and with them. And so that's one of my favorite chapters. It's really a powerful chapter about owning power, about true power for women. And the last part of the book, Into the Sublime, is about there's a piece called The Breaths I Have Left. It's about really understanding, because I was death obsessed for so long, ever since my father gave me a book called Death Me Not Proud when I was 8 years old, about a child who died of a brain tumor. And then I became
it's a little intense.
And as I said in there, I became a teeny bit of a hypochondriac at that point, thinking every headache was a brain tumor, but also realizing I was going to die, and so was everybody else around me. And so I became fascinated and also centered on death. And then I realized when and I wrote about this in the Breaths I Have Left piece, when I had a near-death experience because I got a CAT scan and I had an anaphylactic shock reaction to the contrast dye, meaning I almost died. I started leaving my body, and they brought me back with extreme and heroic measures because no one was expecting this. I had to get rushed to the hospital, I realized that a lot of what I was haunted by wasn't so much dying, was that I wanted to show up for my life while I was living it. And I had been missing it. And so that piece is about realizing that all of us only have a limited amount of breaths, and how can we live fully? And what I did after that near-death experience, my own process of starting to live fully. So I love that piece. And then the last piece is called Snorkeling in the Night Sky. That's right. I was telling you that every piece starts with an everyday challenge. The first piece starts with, we're having to evacuate our house because of a Northern California fire. That's the very first piece in the book. And so I'm going through my closet and asking myself what to take. I have 15 minutes to leave. And so that piece is about enough. There's one piece in also that section about breaking my back in an accident, and what that taught me about not living in my body. So each piece starts with a challenge that at the beginning seems so difficult and so challenging and sometimes impossible, and is about working through it so that the so-called messiness of one's life becomes the doorway to joy and to re-enchantment of daily life. I want people to be re-enchanted with their daily life again, to break the trance of discontent that so many of us are living in and with, even on a low level way.
I like the way you use the word enchanted and enchantment. I have two questions. Thank you for sharing all of that in terms of like how the book flows and the stories and the things that you love. It is really enjoyable to listen to what a person appreciates about their own creativity, because at the end of the day, like, you wrote it, but you didn't write it, you know? Like, you were everything, whoever creates anything, it comes through you. It not necessarily is you. And so it's cool to hear like that appreciation from the other side. Can you say more about snorkeling in the night sky? I have this fear. I love the ocean. I had this cool experience 2 full moons ago. I live in Malibu, right by Paradise Cove, which is not far from Point Doom, which I find to be one of the most magical places in the world. Not that I've been to the entire world, but so far, it's very magical for me. And about 2 full moons ago, it was the full moon in January, second one, and I was there the morning after, and there were all these dolphins and seals and whales, and I ran into this Native American man and just had this very serendipitous conversation. And one of the things I was saying is that I have a healthy fear of the ocean. And he was like, well, that's not fear, it's respect, because the ocean is so powerful. You know, he said, surfers are out there placing themselves between 2 of the most fierce elements, wind and water. And, there's a fear and there's a respect. But, one of the next things for me around this fear is going to the beach or even being in the ocean at nighttime. So was snorkeling in the night sky, were you really doing that? Or was that a poetic description of something?
Snorkeling in the night sky is about making peace with sleeplessness and the middle of the night.
Okay.
And not going on and on about how I can't sleep, how I'll get Alzheimer's or ALS, or my brain will go into cognitive decline unless I get enough sleep. It's about the gorgeousness of night and healing night, because I'm an early morning person, not a night person, and rarely do I choose to be up at 2, 3, and 4 in the morning. But that time is magical. Yeah. It's gorgeous. And so that piece is about discovering the underside, and is called Snorkeling in the Night Sky because the first time I ever went snorkeling, I could not believe what was underneath the ocean, and that I had never known before. And that's how I feel about being out in the middle of the night. There's an entirely new world that exists that if I care to look, it's there.
I love that. I love that so much. So again, a lot of people listening who follow me on social media know I'm often, depending on the time of year, I'm often up between like 1 and 4 a.m. Sometimes I'll post little thoughts on social media, and I made up the hashtag thoughts before dawn. So I'm with you. I love that. So I'm really excited to check out this book. Thank you so much. I know a lot of people, they do the reverse. They like pour through and read the book before they have the person on. I'm like the opposite. I'm like, I want to hear you talk about it. I want to get excited about it. And then I want to go check it out. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. There was one more thing I wanted to ask you about. Is that cool?
Yeah, of course.
I want to go back to the not complaining thing. And you kind of touched on this, but I wanted to be a little more specific. In your perspective and practice of not complaining, what is the distinction or the difference between not complaining, but also not spiritually bypassing what's actually true? Because like there's some real stuff that happens sometimes that isn't okay. And it is negative, and it's okay to acknowledge you're not complaining about it, but it is still happening. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And what I see the difference is that a complaint has a judgment attached to it. It has the slightest tinge of this happened and it really shouldn't have happened this way.
Yeah.
And yet it already happened. And so the thing about complaining is that there's nothing to do about the fact that something has already happened.
Right.
So saying I wished it didn't happen doesn't make it not happening. At that not having happened, at that point, I have three choices. I can leave the situation, I can accept that it happened, or I can do something to change the situation so that it doesn't happen again. But those things are different than running in place and simply complaining about it.
Yep. Cool. Thank you for making the distinction. So for anyone listening, we're going to put links in the show notes to the books, to Geneen's website. If you want more of this, is there anywhere specific you'd like to send people?
Yes, there's a page called GeneenRothBook.com that people can go to and find out about a free master video class I'm offering called Women, Weight, and Power, Releasing the Energy of Obsession, for anybody who buys a book.
Cool.
And I'm very excited about that class.
Also, I want to check that out, actually. I've been having a very interesting experience of that for like the last 5 years since I left fitness. So I am intrigued. I will be checking it out. I hope people who that resonates for also check it out. Geneen, thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom, your perspectives, your beautiful stories. I love the way you weave words together. It's really magical. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Your energy is so fabulous. I've loved being with you.
Thank you. All right. Have a good one. We'll talk to you later.
So like for the longest time, I wasn't comfortable. Like, so when I'm with the analyst people, I just talk about analysts, analyzing data and all that. When I'm with the creative people, I talk about I never mention the other part of me until the play happened, because then my coworkers came and watched the play.
And were they like, what the hell?
Yeah. They're always like, wait, you're an analyst and what the heck? Like, how did you? Yeah. And then my actors and the people who were helping me with the play knew I had a full-time job that has nothing to do with the play. So yeah, that's when I was like, you know what? I'm done trying to like hide. I'm interested in all of that, and I'm doing all of that, and I'm okay with it, and it's okay in my standards, and whatever. Leave me alone.
I appreciate that a lot. And when you say leave me alone, did anyone actually bug you about it, or were you in your head thinking that they would?
Yeah, in my head, or sometimes comments like, "Oh, you're doing too much," or "slow down," or stuff like that. And I would sometimes think about it. I'm like, "Am I doing too much?" Like, okay, yeah, I'm aware when I'm overwhelmed, and I'm aware when I need to like prioritize, but I'm okay. Thank you. Like, I'm not doing too much. I want to do all this stuff, and I'm still okay. Like, I'll let you know when I can't handle it anymore. Yeah.